an unforgettable moment. In liberal circles, police officers have long carried a tarnished reputation. One doesn't need to search far in the archives of talk shows, late-night television, or political commentary to find countless examples where hostility toward law enforcement is loudly and proudly expressed. In many progressive spaces, criticism of the police isn't just common, it's almost expected. Yet sometimes, in the midst of a storm of negativity, a small moment breaks through the noise, quiet, unscripted, and profoundly human. I want to share one such moment. It happened during a late-night radio program, sometime in the late 1990s. Unfortunately, this was long before we could easily archive and fact-check everything with a quick online search. So you'll have to take me at my word. I assure you, this story is true. I was driving late one evening, listening to the radio in my car. The host and a guest were engaged in a spirited conversation about police brutality. Judging by the energy and indignation in their voices, I assumed they were reacting to a recent high-profile incident, likely involving a member of a minority group and a police officer. The discussion was intense and critical, filled with all the familiar arguments: the misuse of force, systemic racism, the imbalance of power. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, if such a topic can be enjoyed, two voices echoing each other's frustrations in the comfort of shared outrage. Then, a caller joined the show. He sounded like the kind of frequent contributor these late-night programs tend to attract, someone with enough familiarity and presence that he felt like part of the extended radio family. From his tone and rhythm, it seemed he was also driving while listening and calling in. But he wanted to make a more focused point, and for safety's sake, he pulled over to the shoulder of the expressway. Remember, the topic of conversation was police brutality. As the caller began to make his case, he suddenly paused and said, "Excuse me for a moment." A police officer had approached his parked vehicle. The entire exchange that followed was heard live on the air. The officer asked, "Are you all right?" "Yes," the caller responded. The officer followed up, "Are you sure you're all right?" Again, the caller answered, "Yes." Without pressing further, the officer simply said, "Okay," and walked back to his patrol car. The encounter ended as quickly and quietly as it began, and then, just like that, the caller returned to the conversation. The host and guest resumed their discussion, continuing on as if nothing significant had happened. They dove back into the familiar narrative of mistrust, abuse, and injustice at the hands of the police. But for me, alone in my car, something about that small interaction stuck. It was, in a word, beautiful. Here was a police officer, in the middle of the night, checking on a stranger sitting in a car on the side of the highway, not with aggression, not with suspicion, but with concern. He asked a simple question, "Are you all right?" Twice, not to intimidate, not to arrest, not to investigate, but to ensure someone's safety. That moment, brief and unscripted, was a reminder of what good policing looks like. It was a small act of empathy, and it happened live on a show that had devoted its airtime to condemning the very institution this officer represented. What struck me even more was the complete lack of acknowledgement from the host and guest. They acted as if it hadn't happened, as if this moment of decency had no place in the narrative. They didn't stop to say, "Well, that was surprising," or "Not all officers are bad." They simply kept talking. To me, that was a missed opportunity, not just for the show, but for all of us. Because the path to reconciliation between the police and the communities they serve is not paved solely with policies, reforms, or task forces. Those things help. But real change, lasting change, comes from moments like that one, small, human, and visible. We need to see those moments. The public needs to see those moments. The media, so quick to amplify horror, needs to broadcast empathy with the same volume. We need to catch officers doing the right thing, not to pretend that abuse doesn't exist, but to show that it is not the whole story. Far from it. There are countless officers who serve with honor, patience, and quiet compassion. They de-escalate, they listen, they help, but their stories rarely make the headlines. And yet, if we want to heal the relationship between law enforcement and the people, showcasing these positive encounters is arguably more powerful than any public relations campaign or diversity seminar. Imagine a program, not one built in an office, but built through storytelling, where real stories of kindness, restraint, and service by police officers are collected and shared, not to excuse the wrongs, but to balance the scale. To remind us that even in the midst of controversy, there are good people doing difficult jobs with heart and integrity. That one small moment on a late-night radio show, quick, quiet, and ignored, was unforgettable for me because it showed what is possible, and more importantly, it showed what is real.